listening to the Departure Lounge podcast with your hosts, Tom Whittle and Ger Dooley, your ticket to the home of aviation podcasts.
It's Sunday night. You know what that means. Very warm welcome, everybody, to episode 3. I can't believe we're already on episode 3 of the Departure Lounge podcast. As you heard in the intro, my name is Tom Whittle, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Ger Dooley. Ger, welcome.
Very good evening, Tom, and it's good to be back for week number 3. Wow, where is the time going, my good pal?
The time is flying, 100%. I can't believe we're already on the third week of
and you know something? I'm absolutely over the moon. You know that we've got to week number 3, and here's to many more good shows to come, as I say.
Definitely. We've got some good shows coming up as well, but it should be fun.
Yes.
I hope everyone is well. We'll go over some housekeeping rules as per normal. So we've changed it up a little bit in terms of the banner. So now you can follow myself, and you can also follow Ger Dooley as well on Instagram, and of course you can also follow myself and Ger on YouTube by subscribing. Ger doesn't really use his Twitter, so you've got my Twitter in the banner as well. If you want to back the channel, then you can find the Patreon page that we've set up on the top on the pinned comments. Hang on there, just being told it's a little bit quiet. Forgive me. I may have to go over it again if people didn't hear me. You think I'd be prepared, but no.
No.
Right, there we go. So hopefully you can all hear me now. So we'll go over it again. So you've got Ger's Instagram and my Instagram that you can follow. You've got the YouTube channels for us also in the top page there. And you've also got my Twitter handle, because Ger doesn't use it. And again, like I said, we've got a Patreon page that's set up now, so you can follow that by, or you can back me rather, by clicking the pinned page, or the pinned comment rather, on the top of the chat. Anybody that backs a $5 or over will have their names in future videos, and also thanked during the videos and future live streams. So if you fancy having your name read out during the stream, then you know what to do. But Ger, should we get into it?
Yes, Tom. What was I going to say? Will we read? I see we have Mr. Bradley Penny Aviation on the chat at the moment, and we have a good few joining in on the chat. Big shout out to y'all. They're welcome, and as Tom said, we're at the week number 3, and so we're going to get cracking and get the show on the road.
We certainly are, but we'll say hello to a few people first.
Yes.
So hello to who have we got in the chat then? We have got Bradley Penny Aviation. Good evening to you.
Yes.
We have got Leo911. Good evening to you. We got Ross Kennedy. We got Mark Barnard. We got Killian Martin. We have got Danielle Bean, and we've also got Ethan Aviation. So a very good evening to each and every single one of you.
A very big shout out to y'all, and my good friend Mark Bernard is in the house as well, and Killian Martin. Oh, Tom, do you know something? Epic. Oh, wow. And Lee 9911, welcome, my friend. It's always good and to Danielle Bean as well. A big shout out to each and every one of you. We'll do more shout outs though, for more as we get through the show. But
definitely.
Now, Tom, I'll let you do the big moment.
Indeed. So we will, like Joe said, we'll get into more shout outs and that throughout the show tonight.
Exactly.
But let's jump into the next segment.
This week's special guest.
So there's no news this week because we are dedicating this show tonight on our special guest.
Yes.
How can we introduce her? So she is a former British Airways 747 captain, first officer, and has been at the controls of many other aircraft, which he will be happily talking about to us this evening. Been with many airlines within the network of British Airways as well, from the likes of Cambrian, for those that remember them, Caledonian as well, and British Air Tours. She's been on TV. She's been on Planespotting Live, which was on BBC4. And overall, she's just a lovely, lovely lady. So everybody in the chat and everyone here, give a warm welcome to our guest this evening, Cat Burton.
Mrs. Cat Burton. Welcome, Cat.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Tom. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm very pleased you invited me, and I can't wait to get chatting to you and start sharing some stories and answering whatever questions the chat room wants to put to me.
It's our pleasure.
Nice one,
it's definitely my pleasure, because to have a pilot or former pilot for British Airways on the show this early on is quite something. So so thank you for your time in advance. And Joe, do you want to get started?
Oh yes. Now, Cat, the first question I'm going to put to you. How did you get into the business of flying, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind you asking at all. I have a father, or had a father. He's sadly passed now, but he came over during the war. He was a Canadian. Came over during the war as a bomber pilot, and he met my mum in South Wales. He was doing his operational conversion at St Athan, and he met my mum at a dance in Cowbridge, and he never went back to Canada. So he got his demob here in the UK, and he immediately joined the Royal Auxiliary Air Force. And of course, being a fully qualified bomber pilot, they immediately put him on the latest jet fighters, and he flew Vampires and Meteors for quite a few years.
Oh, wow.
And then when they disbanded the Auxiliary Air Force, he joined Cambrian Airways. He had 6 months on the ground, and that was atrocious. My mum couldn't put up with him any longer, so she actually paid for him to go and get his ATPL. And he started flying with Cambrian Airways in 1957. I was about 5 then. He'd already infected me with the aviation bug by then. When I was 6 months old, he chucked me in the cockpit of a Vampire and started the engine. And I came out in a rash, apparently, from fright, and Mum gave it him for about 6 months after that for frightening me so much. But it never wore off. I've been in love with aviation from that moment on. As soon as I could, I joined the Air Cadets, and I became a flying scholarship pilot in 1969, having already qualified on gliders by then, and eventually got sponsored by Cambrian Airways to learn to fly commercially up in Perth. I qualified in 1972, and I flew for Cambrian Airways, which became part of British Airways the day British Airways was formed. So I like to say British Airways joined me on the 1st of April 1974, and I retired in 2017 after a career as a first officer on Viscounts, 737s, Tristars, 747 Classic, 747-400s. Then I took my command on the Caledonian Airways 757, and from there back to the 747 Classic, back to the 747-400, and I finished up on the 777.
Wow!
That's quite a resume.
That is quite a resume, Cat. Wow, that is absolutely amazing. You know something, and it's lovely actually listening to you how you described it and everything like that. Wow. Oh, you're amazing. Absolutely amazing. Tom, do you want to go ahead with the next question?
Yeah, so obviously you mentioned that you flew for Cambrian. Now there's a lot of people that will be watching that may not have heard of Cambrian. Would you just describe to everybody who Cambrian were?
Yeah, Cambrian Airways was the Welsh airline. We had two main bases, one at Cardiff and one at Liverpool. And we flew the Irish sea routes. So that's things like Liverpool, Isle of Man, Belfast, Edinburgh, Manchester, down the west coast, all the way from Glasgow down to Jersey, across from Cardiff to Cork, and from Cardiff to Paris. So all of the west coast, basically. we had a sister airline, which was called Northeast, and they did the same thing up and down the East Coast, based in Leeds, Bradford, and Newcastle. And those two airlines were the two airlines that everybody forgets were part of the original British Airways. They, along with BEA and BOAC, formed British Airways on the day of the merger, 1st of April 1974.
Sort of the airlines that get swept under the carpet sort of thing, because a lot of people will think of it as British European Airways and BOAC that sort of merged and formed.
Yeah,
but obviously you've got these...
Most people do, but in fact, we had 400 pilots before the merger.
Yeah.
Northeast had about 180, and the total roster was about 5,000. So we were very small compared to BEA and BOAC, but we like to think we made a significant contribution.
Yeah, and what kind of what sort of aircraft did Cambrian sort of go into service with?
So it started way back flying things like Dragon Rapides, Doves, Herons, and then eventually the DC-3.
Yeah.
And it flew the DC-3 for quite a while. And then eventually it got the Viscount 700. By this stage, it had been taken over by BEA, so it was a wholly owned subsidiary of BEA by that stage, flying the West Coast routes on the Viscount 700. And then by the time I got there, we were flying the Viscount 806, and again up and down the West Coast. And we'd also got hold of some 111s. We got the ex-Court line 111s, and that's what my dad was flying when I started flying the Viscount.
Wicked.
Cash, if you what way did you find the Vickers Viscount? What was it like to handle though? Being a 4-engined propeller prop plane. Am I correct on that one?
You are, yeah. It was 73 seaters when I first started. We got it down to about 71, I think, by the time we got rid of them in 1980. It was manual controls, so no powered controls, but aerodynamic aids, anti-balance and balance tabs and things like that. It was heavy, but responsive. It was quite a nice airplane to fly. I certainly had very pleasant memories of flying it. Of course, we're ultra short haul. I mean, typically Liverpool Isle of Man is about 35 minutes from chock to chock, so about 25 minutes airborne. So, we do 6 of those in a day. And, I think I went to the Isle of Man something like 937 times first 3 years of flying. So.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's
absolutely
amazing.
A
lot of trips to the Isle of Man.
Lot of trips, yeah.
That is quite cool. Because obviously there's a lot of us that I've never experienced a flight on the Viscount or even the BAC 111s and that.
Nor me.
Apart from maybe Joe. But there's a lot of people that haven't experienced it. Which one would you say is more preferable? Or what one would you say would be your sort of your favourite out of the two, of the 111 or the Viscount?
I never flew the 111, so I'd be probably disrespecting it if I was to give much of an opinion on it. My dad loved it. Its nickname was the Pocket Rocket. It wasn't particularly speedy. It was slower even than a 737, but compared to the Viscounts that we'd been flying, it felt speedy. The sort of routes that Dad flew the 111 on, some of the longer routes out of Cardiff and Liverpool, and certainly the trunk routes from London. And he also flew it on sort of inclusive tours, so night flights down to Palma or Ibiza or somewhere like that. So during the day it would fly the schedules, and then at night another crew would take it down to Spain and back with the holidaymakers. Oh, okay. But he really loved it. As I say, I never flew it, so I can't really compare it to anything else. But the Viscount I thoroughly enjoyed. I loved flying the Viscount. In fact, when we came off the Viscount onto the 737, a lot of people had problems because the 737 is so light on the controls. It's got what's called manual reversion. If the powered controls fail, what that means is that you're then using muscle to fly the aeroplane. And a lot of people said, "Can we not leave it like this? It feels like a Viscount."
Yeah,
a Viscount like a 737 on manual reversion. So. But I mean, we're going to get onto what my ultimate favourite aeroplane. There's only one in that I flew, and that's the 747, particularly the 747. It was just an absolute delight to fly. It's responsive, it's crisp. The 747 Classic was, everybody used to say when we came on it, all the instructors used to say that it was inertia that was making it not particularly responsive.
Okay.
It always seemed to go about 10 seconds after you asked it to do something, it would suddenly wake up and do it. But when we got the 400, we found out it wasn't anything to do with inertia. It had a new wing, the 400, and it just responded really quickly. You could throw it around like a fairly heavy and ponderous, but you know, a fighter. It was capable of steep turns and you know, reasonably well structured handling. It was a pleasure to fly. I loved it.
Fantastic. Well, we will come on to your time on the 747 sort of later on in the show.
Yes, of course.
But so throughout your career, obviously you went from sort of Cambrian and then obviously to British Airways, which was, like you said, that transition. But you also flew for British Air Tours. Now, how were you? I mean, because it was a separate, I suppose it was like a separate sort of holiday sort of airline sort of thing. I mean, that's what my perception of it is.
It was the holiday charter division of British Airways.
Yeah.
So it had its own colour scheme. It started out as BEA Air Tours, if you can pronounce that.
Yeah.
And it was just another posting for pilots. It was basically the Gatwick-based 737s.
Yeah.
Wow. So when I came off the Viscount, I didn't particularly want to fly conventional short haul.
Okay.
Because that was on a system called Bidline, and I don't know why, but I got the impression that Bidline, particularly when you were very junior, as I was even at that stage, it meant you did a lot of standby and very little flying. So I went down to somewhere that was pure rostered, which was British Air Tours, and flew around the Greek islands in a 737 half a dozen years, which was
Very
great
cool.
fun. Charter flying is always good fun. The crews are always very friendly and helpful, and you know, it was a real family atmosphere down at Gatwick. So I thoroughly enjoyed myself on the 737. I went on to the Tristar while I was at British Air Tours as well. And I noticed in chat that somebody's actually asked for my least favourite aircraft that I flew, and it has to be the Tristar, I'm afraid, no matter what Jerzo wow might signify. I didn't enjoy flying the Tristar very much. It was incredibly well engineered. It was over-engineered by comparison with any of the Boeings, that's for sure. But it had got this little tiny control yoke, much more in keeping with something like a Baron or a Cessna. Than a big airplane, and that made it quite heavy in roll. And it had a system called direct lift control, which made it very twitchy in pitch. So I found it, in aviation terms, it's called badly harmonized.
Okay.
So ideally, a pilot wants roughly the same force for pushing and pulling and turning. And it was nothing like that. It was really heavy on the ailerons and very twitchy on the elevators. So I never got to terms with it. I only flew it for about 11 months. After 11 months, British Air Tours got some 747s for the long haul. So the Tristar was going to be taken back onto pure short haul.
Okay.
And you need a lot less crews for short haul flying long haul. So they said, we've got too many crews. Would you mind going back to the 737 for a year? But you won't be frozen. You can bid off the 737. So I did, and that's when I went on to the 747 back up, which was, as I say, finding the love of my life from an aviation point.
Yeah, I mean, if we quickly cross into in sort of the comments and stuff that we're getting at the moment. Obviously, you've answered the one about the least favourite aircraft, but we've got quite a few sort of questions in, so we'll get a couple sort of answered now. And then we'll sort of go from there. So we've got one from Killian Martin that says, what has been sort of the highlight of your career?
It's a personal highlight. I make no claims to being a pioneer of female aviation. Your listeners may or may not know, but I'm a transgender woman, and that means I've transitioned to being the real me, and I did that quite late in life. And I assumed it was going to be a career breaker to do that for most of my life. I kept it hidden. But eventually somebody, a good friend, convinced me, because they had, that it wasn't a career breaker. And I was grounded for cardiology investigations. I've got a slightly irregular heartbeat.
Okay.
So the CAA asked me to have some cardiology tests, and they grounded me while those were ongoing. And I didn't have to pretend while I was grounded. I was me all the time at home. I had been me at home before that, gone to work as the old me. But suddenly I didn't have to pretend anymore at home. Yeah. And I found I couldn't have gone back to work as the old me. I would have failed the sim checks. After 4 months off, we go back in the simulator and have to qualify again as pilots effectively. And if I tried to go back as the old me, I would have been so strung out that I would have failed. So I called British Airways and said, I'm coming back as Capt. Yeah. And I got a fabulous response from the manager. I told her that Capt was around when I was grounded, and she'd been looking into how to bring me back as Capt. And when I said it was going to be Capt that came back, she said, "Oh, thank God for that. All the work I've done through the summer's not going to go to waste." And she sent out a notice to all the crew saying Capt's coming back after a short medical absence. You've all had diversity training. You know what to do it or else. Yeah. And at the same time, I posted on our union forum to say, this is where you can have a pop at me if you want. You've been told you've got to be nice to me at work, but you haven't got to be nice to me on here. But within a week, that post had got 2,000 replies and 10,000 views. And nothing was any worse than, good luck to you, Capt, but we don't really understand. And in fact, it was an awful lot of good-natured humour, and of course it was laughing with, not at. For instance, I said, guys, you've all been so nice to me. I owe you a beer down the route when I see you. Quick as a flash, one of the forum wits came back and said, "Taff, aren't you letting the side down? Beer?" I said, "Hey," I said, "I'd buy you a beer. I'm on cocktails." So it was absolutely the highlight of my career. The last 4 years of my career as the real me were the best 4 years of my life, never mind my career.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, wow.
Well, definitely credit where it's due for that.
Yeah, big time. Cash, I have one here from Bradley Penny Aviation. Are you an avid plane spotter, avgeek or whatever?
I'm not sure I describe myself as an avid plane spotter and avgeek, but I certainly look up whenever I hear an aeroplane. I've had the interest in aviation since little, and that never goes away. So I know I'm a reasonably good aircraft recognition. I look up at the sky every time I hear it, for sure. What I don't do is go to the airport specially for that. I tend to go to the airport to go and fly an aeroplane.
Exactly. Yes, but you know something, Kat? I'm actually much the same. Actually, come to think of it, every time now I could be sitting or lying on my bed down in my bedroom, and I could be listening very, very attentively outside, and next thing I'll hear the noise of an airplane going over near my apartment, and I'll go straight onto my flight radar 24, and I'll actually identify the aircraft before I run outside to see what is going overhead. And the minute I go outside, I've identified the exact. It could be either British Airways 787-900 or 10, or it could be British Airways Airbus A350 1000 or something like that. That's kind of how I kind of do it. I listen for the sound, and then I'll run outside the door. Then and I look up, and there's the actual airplane going overhead outside over Kilkenny.
That's Jer for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's me, Tom. That is me. That exactly.
Is,
you said it.
I think lots of people are kind of like that. They'll hear something and then run to the window and try and find what it is. No, I mean, that's fair enough. One more question from the chat, and then we'll get back into sort of the more sort of questions from myself. One Got one from Ross Kennedy who says, "What's your favourite layover city and why?"
Good question, Ross. It varied. It depended on the time of year. If it was the middle of winter, then I was a Caribbean. Literally twice a month, I'd go to the Caribbean. If it was spring or autumn, I'd happily go to the east coast of North America, New York or Chicago, and perhaps do some shopping. But the routes, where I wanted to go varied with the time of year. I'd literally go somewhere that was nice at that time of year. So in August, there's no way you'd find me in New York because New York's unbearable in August. That's why all the people that can afford to get out of New York in August go to Long Island. There are nice places to go all through the year, and I went to a good selection of them. I was so senior in the end, I could just write my own roster and go where I wanted.
Yeah.
But some of the places I've had most fun, I love San Diego, I love Mauritius, certainly Antigua in the Caribbean, and St. Lucia and Barbados. Chicago's brilliant for the shopping. New York's nice every now and again, but not too often. All over the world, really. The Far East, I used to love doing the route down through Bangkok to Sydney.
Yeah.
Used to love just doing the route down to Bangkok and back if the Sydney one was too far for me that month. Yeah, all over the world, wherever the routes went. And to be honest, that's what I loved about long haul, was that you could go to so many different places. I moved off the 747 to the 777. I never enjoyed flying it as much as I did the 747, but it was a nice airplane to watch. But I moved because the routes were moving. And I literally moved off the 747 when the last beach left the 747 and went to the 777. I couldn't contemplate not having a beach in my life.
Yeah.
An avid scuba diver, so I actually used to do an awful lot of my bidding around where I could go diving. So
okay.
I could never have survived if I'd stayed on the 747 and not been able to go diving.
No, no, that's great. So it's obviously hard to kind of pinpoint sort of one favourite sort of place then if you've got so many that stick to mind.
Yeah, I don't have a particular favourite. I have, a handful of favourites. So there's places that I will happily go back to now that I've retired, and there's places that I'm quite happy I never had to see again. And some of the best night stops I've had have been in really unusual places. One of the best Christmases I ever had was in Delhi.
Oh, wow, nice.
I always used to love going to Lagos, not because the hotel was especially nice or because the place was definitely not very nice, but the crew used to be very, very sociable because we were all there together.
Of course.
We'd arrive, we'd say, meet you in the bar in an hour. We'd go down and meet in the bar, and I'd perhaps order up some fries or some pizza to go with the beers we were drinking, and we'd just sit around and chat. And we'd do what airline crews do. We'd talk about airplanes, we'd talk about life, we'd talk about everything we could think of. And they were always a great night.
Capt, I have a question now to ask you. When you flew the 747 now, how did you find it for handling and that? Was there much vibration during the actual takeoff run, when you be going at the speed before you'd have nose wheel lifting off the ground and that?
Yeah, sometimes. If the nose wheel had more wear on one side than the other, you'd get a nose wheel shimmy. And in that, the whole airplane is trying to shake as it goes down the runway. So you try and get the nose wheel off reasonably early in that. But, the airplanes, all airplanes smooth out when you get the
once you get that nose wheel up,
less for the passengers because they're sitting over the main wheels, but we're sitting right over the nose wheel. So, we do try and get it off the ground and smooth the ride out if we can.
Yeah,
or at least take some of the weight off it early.
Yeah. Then the thing is, I as I was saying in our chat there a while back, I had the privilege, I was saying to yourself and Tom, that I got to sit on the jump seat on the 747-100 now, and you could feel a slight bit of vibration, or because you're accelerating so fast. And of course, we had a few dignitaries on the Aer Lingus 747, to bring them up on the tour around Ireland, and to give them the view what it was like, and that. And during the takeoff, you could actually feel a slight bump in the runway, with the nose wheel, because you're hitting those little grooves or something in the middle of the runway when you're going along, and you could feel the nose actually bobbing up and down then as well, before you lift, and then you see the guys then just pulling back, and then you rotate. It was absolutely, I never thought I'd ever get the experience. Now, I was only 10 years of age when I got to experience that, and I can vividly remember the whole thing, how it unfolded and everything like that.
Yeah, it's an amazing experience to sit there on the jump seat. The 747 is so high up there. When you rotate, the cockpit goes from being on the 4th floor of a block of flats to on the 7th floor of a block of flats before the main wheel leave the ground. So, you are sitting literally on the 7th floor of a block of flats as you get airborne. Most of us try and avoid hitting all the lights down the middle of the runway if we can, because they make that horrible to-dump.
Yeah.
And, that's not very pleasant for the passengers. It's not very pleasant for us. So we usually track one side or other of the white line down the middle.
Yeah.
That's slightly different. And we're doing well over 180 knots as we leave the ground if we're heavy in a 747. So 180 knots is 205 miles an hour.
Wow.
And, that's pretty quick to be on the ground still. And at that point, we lift the nose wheel off. So. Yeah.
Because the thing is that's the thump or whatever when you're doing it, and you can actually feel the whole flight deck literally just vibrating. You see, this is the thing. As I said, I was saying to Tom now during the week when and yourself, when I used to go on me plane spotting trips to Heathrow, I'm dead certain I think I might have got your flight departing a few times.
Well, it's entirely possible. I say we need to compare our logbooks, your spotting logbook and my flying logbook. I can do it fairly easily because most of my logbook is electronic, so I can just search up the date and see whether or not I was flying on the day you were.
Yeah. Okay, Tom, I'm going to let you continue there. I'm just answering the message here.
No, that's right. So we'll jump on to, obviously, like I said, the 747. But before that, we got. Let me just get that right. Got Sharon Horn, who says, "Hey guys and hey Cat, pleased to be listening to this." So good evening to yourself. For joining us. We'll go into a couple more questions as well while we're here. We've got one from Will Ingleby, who says, "What's on your flying bucket list?"
Gosh, well, I think I've probably filled my bucket by now. I'm still flying and still loving my flying. I'm teaching now at Cardiff, and I teach on pretty much all the four-seaters that we've got. So that's a range from the PA-28 to the DA-40 and DA-42. Just to carry on flying, to be honest. I'm not ready to stop yet. I had to give up public transport flying when I passed 65. I was quite resentful of that. In fact, I would happily have carried on flying, and I still passed my Class 1 medicals and my instrument rating, and I am still flying along and teaching people to fly, teaching people at all stages of their induction into the aviation industry, all the way from trial lessons up to instrument rating training. And that's me completing my bucket list, really, just to keep flying in whatever way, shape, or form it is. Now, I would love, I suppose, to qualify on gyrocopters.
Oh, okay.
I've had a couple of flights in gyrocopters, and they actually trademarked a phrase, the gyrocopter grin, and it's perfectly true. Every time I've got out of a gyrocopter, I've had this big grin on my face because it is just such fun. It's like flying an airborne motorbike.
Wow.
Great fun. And yeah, I would love to carry on and get a PPL in that, possibly an instructor rating in that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't think my nerves would be able to handle a flight in that.
Oh, they're good fun and they're really safe. Actually.
I'd be the same, Tom.
The older designs, like Ken Wallace's designs, they had a particular problem which caused them to be less safe than the modern ones. They were very, very short, whereas the modern ones are all two-seaters, so they're much longer aircraft. And that means they've got better directional stability. And also they had very short masts for the rotors. And that means that it was possible for the rotors to flap down and hit the tail. Whereas now they've all got much taller masts. The design has changed radically over the last 30 years. And what we've now got are very, very safe aircraft.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it's a different answer to what I think a lot of people would probably say. I mean, a lot of people would have destinations that... but, I mean, obviously, you've covered plenty in your time as a pilot. So, the gyrocopter is definitely a new answer for that sort of question. So, no, at least that's... yeah, no, that's actually really cool. I see a lot of people doing it, and I'm thinking, I could never do that.
Yeah, I noticed that Manchester Aircraft Spotter was asking me what would my dream be, and that's probably it. I'd love to get myself a gyrocopter and just enjoy that. They're great to fly when it's really windy too, so they could be a great aircraft to have for the days when the light aircraft I currently fly can't fly.
Okay.
And I noticed that immediately after that, Leo 911 asks, what was my worst experience with turbulence? And funnily enough, it's just happened this week.
Ooh.
Or at least a bad experience with turbulence has happened this week in the Diamond 42. Last few days have been horrifically unstable. And I was just flying it around building hours so that I can teach on it. And I was chasing up and down from 4,000 feet to 10,000 feet and back down, just trying to find somewhere smooth. Yeah. And it was literally throwing me up, and it's a tight cockpit, and my head was hitting the flipping canopy, and it was just...
Oh, God.
If you want my worst experience with turbulence, and this is a scary one, it was on the Viscount. It was in August, and I'm trying to think what year it would have been. It would have been 1974, probably, August 74. And we were taking a bunch of school kids from Liverpool to Montpellier. At the end of the summer holidays, they'd been over on an exchange. So we had 3 teachers and about 70 French school kids. And they were dismantling the aeroplane, literally. So we put the seatbelt signs on to try and control them. The teachers were sitting in a row, smoking galwaz and ignoring the lot of them.
Yeah.
The cabin crew were tearing their hair out. We put seatbelt signs on, not expecting turbulence. But as it happened, the Met men in Montpellier hadn't bothered to update the weather tape. So we were hearing the weather from the day before, basically. And the Viscount at that stage didn't have enough AC power to run both the autopilot and the weather radar. And we had the autopilot in. And we flew into the mother and father of a thunderstorm.
Wow.
And the airplane was being thrown towards the ground with full power on. We were at 4,000 feet to start with, and it was going down at more than 4,000 a minute with full power on. And then we suddenly went into the updraft, and we were going up at 4,000 feet a minute.
Wow.
And then we got one wing into the updraft and one wing into the downdraft, and the airplane slowly rolled over onto its back. And we got about 100 or 110 degrees by the time we shot out of this cloud and nearly did a roll the other way. Both the skipper and I had been using all our strength to try and keep the airplane the right way up, basically, and not succeeding. And we flew out to sea and recovered, and most of the kids had got broken bones. We came back around and landed, and the rain was bouncing a foot high off the tarmac. And we had got a string of ambulances meeting us for these poor kids.
Yeah.
And we went in to have a word with the Met man. And, of course, he was French, and we spoke to him in fractured French, but he just shrugged, as the French sometimes do, as if to say, well, it's not my fault, you know. Whereas, of course, we thought it was exactly his fault. So thunderstorms are not a good place to be for an airplane, no matter how big it is.
No, definitely not.
Definitely not, that's right. No, God. Thank God I never never really experienced a thunderstorm. No, well, there was a bit of a thunderstorm, all right, in Atlanta, but that was it. But no, that I'd say that was a scary few moments though for you, Kat. To be honest.
Yeah. I noticed
Wow.
Ian Hartley has asked, would I not like to take up something more sedate like ballooning after you retire from teaching? I actually did some ballooning many, many years ago. I was effectively the co-pilot in the Women's World Balloon Championship, and we came third. so I've done a bit of ballooning, not as a pilot in command, but basically doing the navigating. And we came third. We got lots of little tasks that we had to do, like find a cross in the middle of a field and flower bomb it and things like that. But we managed to come third in that. So ballooning is really pleasant. Okay. I've got a great friend, Ali Dunnington, who is a charter pilot of balloons. She's got a balloon based near Bristol, and she flies all around the world. And at one point, be a support pilot for her, flying a Beech 18, as she tried to fly her balloon, or literally in as many countries around the world as possible. But in the end, it didn't come off, unfortunately. Although she's flown in so many countries, her balloon, that I've lost count of them. Well over 100 countries that she's flown
in. Wow.
Yeah, brilliant. That's amazing. So obviously going back to the whole teaching side of things, we did have a question earlier from Bradley Penny Aviation, who says, what advice would you give to anyone that's wanting to be a pilot?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball. Obviously, the aviation industry is in one of recessions ever. Before the recession started, thanks to COVID, before that started, the forecast was that we were going to need something like 500,000 new pilots over the next 20 years.
Wow.
To cover retirements and expansions and all sort of things. Now, it's pretty much anybody's guess, but if ever I could come up with some sensible advice in that background, it would be that the best place to join an airline is at the start of a recruitment bulge. So if you can time your training so that you qualify just as the airlines are starting to recruit again and get in on the ground floor, you will always be above everybody that joins after you on the seniority list. So that's a really good place to. I joined right at the end recruitment bulge.
Okay.
So for the first 10 years I was in British Airways, I started off as 400 off the bottom of a 5,000 pilot seniority list. And 10 years later, I was 250 off the bottom of a 2,500 pilot seniority list.
Whoa.
So I got closer to the bottom, closer to the top as well, but only because of shrinkage.
Okay.
And, it took me 19 years to get a command in British Airways. But the people that had joined at the start of that same recruitment bulge were the captains that I was flying with when I first joined, and they'd only been in the airline for 7 years.
Okay.
So if you want an accelerated career, be at the start of that recruitment bulge. So it's going to be up to you to time your own training such that you qualify in a sensible time so that you're available to airlines to be recruited early on in that next recruitment bulge.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly not telling people don't train to be a pilot now, but I'm saying try and do it in a way that you can control the timing so that you can look at all the signs and try and get it right.
Yeah.
Just at the right time.
I suppose if if anybody's got any questions, obviously they can contact you like on Twitter and Facebook and that, just to sort of try and get some insight.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. You'll see on the screen, I've put up some social media handles. If you want to sort of get in touch with Kat in regards to becoming a pilot or what steps need to be taken. So definitely worth following and getting in touch with her about it. So yeah, nice one.
Twitter and Facebook probably a little bit more reliable than Snapchat.
Yes.
I haven't really got the hang of Snapchat. But I'm on Instagram somewhere. I'm on Instagram somewhere as well, but I can't myself. So.
Cash, I have a question here from Kate O'Connor. What's your favourite airport?
I'm going to have to say Singapore. Singapore Terminal 1 is breathtaking. typical of a modern airport. It's a shopping attached.
Right.
But they've done it so well. Some airports, one in the northwest of England springs to mind regularly. Walking through it is an assault on the eyes and senses, sort of horrible neon lighting. Just thoroughly unpleasant. I want to get through there as quick as I can. But in Singapore, they've done it in such a way that you're tempted to linger because it's just a really pleasant environment with superb shops and good travelators to get to all the gates. It's well laid out. It's well signposted. Yeah, I just think Singapore Changi Terminal 1 is the best airport I've ever operated in and out of.
Wow. So going from sort of the favourite airport to operate in and out of, on the flip side to that, Manchester Airport Spotter says, what's the hardest approach that you've ever flown into?
So everybody's going to think Kai Tak, aren't they? Kai Tak was a great airport to operate into. It was fascinating. We had to do extra training before we went there. But it wasn't actually as tricky as people think. You flew at an instrument approach, which put you in the right place. And as you popped out of cloud, there was the checkerboard in front of you, row of poles to follow. So it wasn't particularly difficult to get yourself in the right place at the right height, at the right speed. Much more tricky, I think, is Funchal. In Funchal, you've again got a row of posts on a curving approach, which you've got to follow. And for that one, you've got to self-position to cross the coast at a banana packing shed. I think from memory, it's at about 750 feet. And you then turn right to line up with the runway. And virtually as soon as you're straight, you pass a little valley to the left.
Okay.
And Funchal is carved out of the side of a mountain. It's a 7,000-foot peak in the middle of the island. And it's right down 200 feet off the sea. Literally carved like a road that runs around the side of a hill. And this little valley is at around about a mile short of the runway. And very often there are cold, strong winds that blow down the valley. So they give you winds at Funchal, whereas most airports, they just give you a wind for the airport. At Funchal, they give you a touchdown wind, a far end wind, and they also give you a wind at this Point Rosario. And if it's a strong crosswind at Point Rosario, you've got to be ready for it so it doesn't blow you off the centre line with just a mile to go. So, I'd class Funchal as being pretty much the most challenging place I've ever flown into. Some of the Greek islands are interesting. The visual-only approaches, Skiathos, places like that. Some of the Caribbean islands these days, pilots are so used to flying precision approaches. And in the Caribbean, they're pretty much all offset NDB approaches, things like that. So, really back to old tech.
Did you ever have to do a go around at Funchal airport now?
No, I didn't have to do a go around at Funchal. No, we managed to get it right.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, that's good.
Probably one of the few pilots think that didn't have to do a go around at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I was lucky. I never let Rosario catch us out. So if you don't let Rosario catch you out, then, you've got a reasonably good chance of being stable on the approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually flew the first British Airways 737 into Funchal. It was, we were just starting up the route, and we actually had an incident on the way out. So we got in fine, but we were expecting to have to tech stop for fuel just about 40 miles away, just a little hop across the sea to the island of Porto Santo, which has got a nice long straight runway. It literally goes from one side of an island to the other, and there's a mountain. So we were expecting to have to stop there for fuel. But when I did the takeoff I was the first officer, obviously, at this stage. When I did the takeoff calculation, I said to the skipper, who was a manager, because it was the first flight in, I said, we can make it back to Gatwick. And he said, are you sure? So I rechecked all the calculations. I passed it all over to him, and he did, and he agreed with me. So we put the fuel on, we put the passengers on. We seemed to sag off the end of the runway a bit like, taking off from a carrier. And off we went back to Gatwick, and we got back to Gatwick quite successfully. A couple of days later, he called me up and he said, "Cat, you know that takeoff from Funchal where we sagged off the end of the runway and sort of accelerated again?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "We were 2.5 tons overweight." I said, "Oh my God, what, did I make a mistake in the calculations?" He said, "No, you didn't." He said, "Your calculations were spot on," and I agreed with him at the time. What had happened, when you use a correction called packs off, what you're doing is switching the air conditioning off, so giving a little bit of extra power to the engines for thrust instead of having to run the air conditioning.
Yeah.
There are a couple of different ways of correcting for that on the 737. The first one is in detail. So they give you a completely separate page, one page for packs on, one page for packs off. But the other way is that they just think, right, what's the temperature at which the correction is least? And we'll just give that as a blanket correction for all temperatures. So you don't get the ultimate advantage at the coldest and the hottest temperatures, but you get the same, the one, let's say the worst case is 21 degrees. You put the correction for 21 degrees as a linear correction. So I put that linear correction in, and it got us back to Gatwick. But it turns out they hadn't given us the worst case, and we were actually taking off in the worst case, 2.5 tons overweight. So that they'd let us use too big a correction for switching the packs off. So yeah, we staggered out of that one, that's for sure.
Wow.
They then issued the pages as 2 separate pages, a packs on page and a packs off page, which is what they should have issued in the first place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the backroom boys that let us down on that.
Oh, okay.
And Cat. Oh, sorry.
No,
sorry, Tom. And Cat, was the first 737? No, was it a nice easy handling aircraft, or was it fast? And that.
No, 737s have never been speedy.
Right.
737-200 advanced British Airways had, and back cruised at about Mach 7.3, Mach 7.4, so really quite slow by jet standards. A little bit quicker than a 111, but nowhere near as quick as, say, a Trident or Tristar or the 7.4. 7.4 is a really, really speedy aeroplane in the cruise. It cruises at anywhere between 8.4 and 8.8. So. Sadly, I never got to see a Trident actually taken off. I've seen videos on YouTube or very, very loud, noisy sort of engines on the Trident, but a beautiful airplane though, really, really beautifully shaped. Yeah, we called it the de Havilland ground gripper. It took so much runway. It was the only 3-engine jet that needed a 4th engine. Booster engine in the tail on the Trident 3. It was a design that had been mucked up by BEA, to be honest. They initially said they only wanted a 100-seater, and then pretty quickly they wanted 130. Those extra 30 seats that they'd effectively had the engine to make it less thrusty, and it couldn't power the bigger aeroplane, pretty much the size that de Havilland wanted to make in the first place. BEA had a habit of mucking up aircraft designs. Right, okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Got a couple comments here which I'll get to. So first one we've got is David Everett, who says, "Hi Cat, great you mentioned Cambrian Airways." So I imagine that would be someone that
Hi David. Yeah, David worked for Cambrian back in the 70s and the 60s, I suspect.
Oh wow, okay.
So David's part of a Cambrian reunion group run on Facebook.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And we've also got Kevin Phillips, who has said, "Have you ever done an emergency landing?"
Yeah. Let me think back. I've lost 4 engines through my career, and that's not many when you consider I've done 31,000. Those 4 engines. The first one was a shutdown because of oil pressure, which we wouldn't do these days. We'd need at least 2 parameters to confirm that the engine was suffering and it wasn't just a gauge failure. That was on a Viscount. We just happened to be overhead Cardiff on the way from Liverpool to Jersey. We just popped into Cardiff. The engineers had a look at it, said, gauge, and off we went back on our way to, but we landed on 3 engines. Off we went on our way to Jersey. I had 2 engine failures on the 747 Classic. Both of them happened on the ground, and they were with reverse thrust. And the one that's really memorable was in Dhaka in Bangladesh. And that was a large red kite that flew into the front of one of the engines and caused it to reverse surge.
Oh, yeah.
So big bangs and touch and go whether it was going to be me cancelling, flight engineer switching the engine off, and the captain saying, "What are you two doing?" He suddenly lost reverse thrust and an engine. that was a reverse surge, boss.
Oh, wow.
And I had another reverse surge at a different place as well. I nearly lost an engine on 747, but we didn't shut it down, which was the company were really pleased about that. We were heading for somewhere in the States, I can't remember exactly, but we were about half an hour past Shannon, heading westbound, and we got vibration on an engine. So I was the technical officer on the fleet when it was introduced. I wrote one of the technical manuals when the 400 first arrived. So I was digging into the computers and actually doing lots of diagnostics on the engine, and my conclusion was that it was genuine vibration.
Yeah.
And I said to the skipper, they're probably going to want us back at. So he said, "Well, you get onto Heathrow on the satellite." So we did, and they said, "Yeah, can you bring it back to Heathrow, please?" And we told Shamwick that we were coming back off the ocean and heading back. We went to Heathrow, but we throttled the engine back to idle, which meant it was still running its gearboxes. So it was running the hydraulic pump, and it was running the generator, and it wasn't shut down. It was running at idle. So we landed back at Heathrow, and as we got onto stand, the technical manager of the 747 and the technical manager of the 767 crowded into the back of the flight deck and said, "Did you shut it down?" "No, we didn't shut it down. We ran it at idle for the gearboxes and everything." "Oh, thank God for that." Because if it was the same engine that was going to go on the 767 that was about to be introduced, and if we'd shut it down, it would have ruined its ETOPS record, its extended twin operations record.
Okay.
And they wouldn't have been able to do the 180 minutes at launch. They'd have had to cut it back to about 120 probably for the initial launch. And they were so grateful that we kept this flipping thing running at idle. Yeah. It was genuine vibration. It was the engine had a little bit of a problem at the start. It had tip seals on the fan, and they were breaking down, and that was causing the fan to vibrate. And it was by looking through the diagnostics of the engine that I was able to actually work out what was happening with it. And that's what we came back with, and they obviously fixed it as a different coast.
And tell us, Kat, a fuel dump now. Did a fuel dump have to be organised prior to your return to Heathrow, like before you? Because normally a heavy, like if an aircraft is pretty heavy, like fully fueled and that, you kind of have to lighten the load for landing or something. I've seen it being done a couple of times, with aircraft.
I can't honestly remember whether we had to do this occasion, but I'd be inclined to doubt it. Heavy for a 747 means going for a 14-hour flight. When it's only going to the east coast of the States, a 7-hour flight, it's got maybe 80 tons of fuel at takeoff instead of 180 tons of fuel at takeoff.
Okay.
And that pretty much means that we're already not far above max landing weight. And by the time we'd flown out to half an hour beyond Shannon and back again, that was, 3 odd hours of flying.
Right.
So we'd burnt off 30 tons of the fuel we got on board anyway. So I'm pretty sure that would have got us back below max landing weight. I mean, if we'd had to, we could have dumped, obviously. But, I suspect that just that length of burn was enough to bring us back down under max landing weight.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, because I know, like there has been incidents like where, like for instance, Tom, I think you might, I don't know whether you heard about the cargo 747, the ATC cargo 747, that was uh, after being in Shannon or something. I think something happened with an engine. I think on takeoff, it lost power or something, and it took off, and they had to go over the Shannon estuary, and they had to dump fuel to and return back to Shannon. So it was on the ground, I think, for nearly a week till a replacement engine or something was sent in, so that the aircraft could continue its flight on or something, like, as far as I can remember.
I haven't heard about that one.
Yeah. I mean, airplanes do dump regularly, very heavily laden. Cargo airplanes tend to be much, much closer to limits than passenger airplanes.
Yeah.
And very often they can't do the 14-hour legs because they've got such a big payload. Good friend of mine flies the 747-8 for UPS, and she rarely flies for more than 7 hours.
Wow,
that's cool.
That is cool. Yeah.
I noticed just arrived at the bottom of the list of questions there is, did you ever get to ride in Concorde, Capt? It seems to be signed by a gentleman called Mark Bannister. I'm not sure if that's any relation to the chief pilot of Concorde, possibly not. And the answer to it is yes. I got chucked on Concorde to fly out to New York and then get on a local carrier to get to Boston because somebody had gone sick in Boston and they needed me there to fly the early morning flight out again.
Oh, wow.
So the only way they were going to do that was to put me on Concorde. So yeah, I did get to fly in Concorde. That was one occasion. I did fly on it for a similar reason. I never got to fly Concorde. I was invited. I turned them down. Concorde was a bit of a dead end in terms of the operation. It just went to New York as a route. It went on occasional round-the-world jollies. But I would have loved to fly Concorde, perhaps out of the Bay of Biscay up to Mach 2, bring it back somewhere and fly in the circuit and, do a bit of base training in it, and then hand it back. But if you ever went on Concorde, you were stuck on it for the rest of that portion of your career.
Okay.
So if you went on it, you were stuck on it either until you got a captain, and then you were allowed off it to take a command, or until you retired if you're already a captain. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted routes. And for me, the 747, when I went on it, was the epitome of a great route structure.
Wow. So you wanted to ideally then sort of...
It's like Mark is denying all knowledge.
Wow, absolutely fantastic.
Is that because then you were turning down the Concorde and that for the fact that you just wanted to stay on the 747s?
Yeah.
Wicked. All right.
But Cat, would you have loved... Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, there's a question here that says, what advice would you give somebody who is a nervous flyer?
I've spoken to nervous flyers on board the airplane. In fact, I'm quite good friends with someone that I met on one of my flights. And I went out and sat with her in first class. She was a first class. Went out and sat with her for a couple of hours, including as we went through a little bit of light turbulence. And really, just the fact that, first of all, airplanes are built so strong that anything that's not squishing you is definitely not squishing the airplane. So, don't worry about things like turbulence. The airplane can take an awful lot. But just remember that airline pilots are renowned for not having the right stuff. So the right stuff was what the test pilots had, the guys that flew the X-planes in the States, Chuck Yeager and so on. There was a book written about them, wasn't there, called The Right Stuff, and a lot of them went on to be astronauts.
That's right.
The right stuff is not something we look for in an airline pilot. What we look for is I'm tempted to say yellow streak a mile wide, middle of your back. What we're looking for is somebody who's so conscious that what they're doing needs to be done in a way that minimizes risk, that they're going to get themselves safe back on the ground. And we don't really think in terms of I've got 400 people's lives in my hands. I keep thinking about I've got my life to get back on the ground safely. So, we risk assess very carefully as airline pilots. So we're not going to put you in any danger whatsoever.
Okay.
Now, I have a good question.
Just trust the pilots, basically.
Yeah, I have a good question for you now, Cash, and I've always wanted to ask this question. How long does it take for the cabin to pressurize before the aircraft is actually ready for departure?
So we don't pressurize on the ground. Well, that's not strictly true. We pressurize on the ground, but only taxiing out. And it only goes to about 300 feet underneath the runway. And the reason for that is that we want to be able to get the doors. And if the airplane is pressurized, you can't get the doors open. So, if something goes badly wrong, we do want to be able to get out of the air. So the airplane is pressurized just a couple of ounces of differential pressure. And the reason for that is so that when we do take off, no bump on your ears. Then basically the airplane climbs much faster than the cabin is allowed to climb. So if we're climbing to, let's say, 31,000 feet, we're probably going to do that in 10 or 15 minutes. So we're doing 2,000 to 3,000 feet a minute of climb. But the cabin is only going to be climbing at about 300 or 400 feet a minute, so that you can barely notice it on your ears. So by the time we've got up to 30,000 feet, the cabin's probably only at 5,000 feet. So that's how the pressurization happens. And then the reverse happens back down. So by the end of a flight, we may well be up at 40,000 feet, and the cabin by that stage may be up at 6,000 feet. So, but in the time that we lose 40,000 feet of altitude, the cabin's only got to lose 6,000 feet. So 20 minutes or so of descent keeps it nice and gentle for the passengers' ears, but gets us down where we need to be.
Excellent. That is amazing. Thanks very much for answering that question. I always wonder, with the cabin, when it, because I've often had my ears pop a couple of times, and they always tell you, like, on board the airplane, like, to make sure that you kind of keep swallowing, and it kind of keeps your ears sort of steady during the actual climb out, and then when you're coming down. Now I get it.
So Joe, I can give you a tip here, but it's not from being a pilot; it's from being a diving instructor. What you're trying to do is equalize the pressure in the middle ear, and the best way to do that is actually something that people don't bother to teach very well. That little tube, the eustachian tube that runs the back of the mouth into the ear, it developed when we were on all. So it was designed or developed, evolved, so that it clears your ears naturally if you throw your head back, because that's where it would have been if you'd been on all fours. So when we try and put our chin down on our chest and pinch our nose and do that, we're actually making it crumple up. So if you do the same thing but with your head right back as far as you can get it, you'll find your ears click naturally.
All right, okay. I must try that if I'm ever whenever I get on a plane again. I hope to get on one when all the lockdown and stuff is kind of eased off at some point, and that's at the present time. Like,
you don't have to wait, Joe. That's all you've got to do is just throw your head back now and move. You'll hear both ears go click.
Oh yeah, I'm after hearing it now. I'm after doing it now. Yeah. Wow.
At least that'll keep you busy.
Hey Tom, that'll keep me busy.
That's Joe busy for the rest of the stream, everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks for answering that question, Kat. I'm very happy now, actually, with that information. Now, right, any more comments for Kat? Come on, folks, keep the comments coming in.
So I've got one here that I've just been scrolling back through. I was going to ask it. It was actually from Ross Kennedy again. He says, if you could operate one more route and aircraft that you operated in your career, what would it be?
Gosh. I guess I'd probably take a 747 to Mauritius.
Wow, excellent.
It would certainly be a 747. Yeah, Mauritius was always very, it's a nice enough airport. It's nice and quiet.
Yeah.
And the hotels there are stunning. So operate to Mauritius and get off. My retirement trip was along the same lines. It was to Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic. And that, again, was because we stayed in the most superb all-inclusive resort. It really was. I got to choose my trip for retirement, and that was it.
Oh, wow. So do you
Alexander...
People... Go on.
Sorry, Tom. Just one more quick question, and then fire away with your one there, Tom. Alexander, is cabin pressurization automatic?
So the answer to that is pretty much yes on everything I can these days. Modern aeroplanes, almost everything's automatic. When we went from the 747 Classic to the 747-400, the reason that we could do that and get rid of the flight engineer was that everything was automated for us. So we had to do very little. All the fuel management was automatic. The pressurization was automatic. But of course, it has fallback modes, which were much more like what people had to do in the past. The fallback mode, the initial fallback mode, pretty much the same as a 747 Classic that was working normally, where you had to the cabin altitude that you wanted it to go to and the rate that you wanted it to get there manually. And then if that failed, we went back to the ultimate, which is basically playing with valves. So the way an airplane pressurizes is that it pumps air in from the engine as fast as it can. And there's a big hole down at the tail called the outflow valve. And by modulating the outflow valve, regulates how quickly that air can escape. And if you let it escape quickly, the airplane will climb. Escape less quickly, the airplane will descend. So when we're up at cruising altitude, the valve is just barely cracked open. And then as we start to descend, we pull the power back. It literally does close completely because it needs the airplane to get as much air in it as it can so that it can repressurize towards the ground. But all of those things happen completely automatically unless something has failed. When I first started on the Viscount, it was utterly manual. And we literally had to play with those valves all day long to get the airplane to sit at a sensible cruising altitude. And, we'd move the outflow valve manually to get just the right amount of leakage for the altitude we wanted the airplane to be sitting at. So, yeah, it's got a lot easier through my career, that's for sure.
Okay, Tom, fire away there.
I was just going to say, there's a question that I've just come across now from Ian Hartley, who says, have you ever witnessed anything either unidentifiable, I'll do that again, unidentifiable whilst flying or been at cruising sort of level?
No, I'm afraid very boring answer. Nothing has. I was in the air once when somebody else was screaming about something they'd seen shooting across speed. No, the most interesting things I've seen are probably things like the aurora.
Or the Northern Lights.
Yeah, you get to see those most times. Most flights back from the West Coast, because you go up into the Arctic, across Canada, and pretty much every night you see aurora, which is a fabulous thing to see.
Wow.
To be able to see it regularly like that, say, well, I'm going to be able to see the aurora is just spectacular.
Yeah, that for me is like on my bucket list of like things to do, is to actually go and see the Northern Lights. It's an amazing spectacle, and I think for like pilots have got it quite lucky, I suppose, if they're going to see it all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. You see different sorts of aurora. Green curtains, you see multicolored. You can see rapidly moving curtains. But they're beautiful.
Amazing. I'm slightly jealous now.
Absolutely. Cash, one more question here. Do you get upset? This is Alexander again. Do you get upset seeing the 747s scrapped at St. Atans?
Yeah, I do. obviously being based at Cardiff, and that's where British Airways 747s were put into storage before they decided to scrap them. We saw them all arrive there. The decision was made that they were going to be scrapped when they left. And, I'd actually literally be at work, and out of the window suddenly a 747 would be taxiing out on its flight. And I had to go through that multiple times as the airplanes all slowly left Cardiff. And a large number of them went to St Athan. And, there's even a TV program watching them being cut up. And, it hurts. I was on that airplane from day one. I was the first line co-pilot 747 for the Airways. Everybody else on that first course had an appointment. There were training managers, technical managers, training standards captains, the simulator development captain, and a whole bunch of training co-pilots and the technical flight technical officer co-pilot, and me, a line co-pilot. I got cornered in the bar in Amsterdam where we were doing the course, and they said, "Cat, you haven't got a job." I said, "What do you mean? I'm a pilot." They said, no, a proper job. So they dropped this technical manual, the minimum equipment list, into my lap and said, "You're going to write that for us over the next 6 months until the airplane arrives." That was my association with the force. I literally picked one up from the factory and did my training by picking it up from the factory, flying it all day, and then dropping it off at Boeing Field, and then coming back to Heathrow. And I love that airplane. It does. It hurts to see it go. It was a fabulous accompaniment for all those years.
Listening to you saying that, kind of building me up a bit here now. I'm thinking about them, because all the times been seeing them at London Heathrow, constantly around from T5, taxiing up to the runway to take off. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for me doing a return trip back to London Heathrow for a Planespotting trip. Hopefully to meet up with Tom as well, and a couple of other good people as well. It's going to be hard not seeing any Queen of the Sky coming out around from T5.
There's still plenty of freight outfits that use them, because they're irreplaceable in freight. That huge front opening door on the freighter, and just the sheer volume of freight they can carry. So I think it's going to be quite a while before they disappear completely. The Dash 8 only sold to Lufthansa for the Dash 8i, but the Dash 8F has sold really well all around the world. In fact, they're still delivering them as far as I know. Or if they're not, they've only just stopped. I know there's a friend of mine that flies for UPS. They've got a whole fleet now of these brand new Dash 8s. So it'll be a while before they get retired.
Well,
I can see why they retired the 400 from passenger service. It guzzles fuel by comparison with the, even the 777. Never mind the 78. We could do in a 777. We could carry 335 people, as opposed to the 747's 337.
Right.
And we would use less than 2/3 of the. So it makes sense that they've got to go modern. Fuel figures are even better for the 787. I couldn't argue with them retiring them, but just from a gut feeling point of view, it hurts to see them being scrapped.
Now, if you were still flying commercial passenger aircraft now, Cash, which would you like to try and fly? Would you like to try maybe the 787 Dreamliner or the Airbus A350-1000?
Yeah, I'm Boeing, aren't I? I'm Boeing through and through. If you broke one of my bones, it would look like a stick of rock. It would have Boeing written on the inside of it. I've never flown an Airbus, and I've never really had any. I'm very happy with my Boeings.
Okay, but that's a perfectly good answer there. Anyway, Cash. Tom, have you any more questions there yourself?
Yeah, so I'll just mention mentioned now, we'll go for another sort of about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll start. We'll start to wrap things up. So if you've got any other questions that you want to ask Cat, get them into the chat, and we'll get to them sort of as soon as we can. One question literally just coming now, is a lot of ex-fighter pilots go on to become passenger pilots. Do they need a special training sort of regime to help them transition, or?
We do train ex-forces pilots. I think they call them trash haulers. Transition into civil aviation very easy because it's not that different. But yeah, the fast jet pilots, they have to slow down. They've got some fantastic skills, but a lot of them don't translate very well.
No.
They don't have the instrument flight skills. They come to civilian schools, and most of their training concentrates on instrument flight. And they've got to get used to rate 1 turns, which are in the training airplanes at normally about 19 degrees a bank. So they're not exactly being thrown around when they're on instruments. We do fly steep turns in training on big aircraft. Not so much these days because with fly-by-wire 45 degrees, it throws away some of the protections, and you can't get them back until you land. But certainly with the 747, we used to fly 60 degree steep turns. I was lucky enough to be on Boeing instructor rather than British Airways because, the airline wasn't set up to train for course number 1. Somebody had to teach the first British Airways trainers. And we did the American checks and ratings, and that included steep S turns with height loss of factor. That was good fun. I can throw a 747. Do I want to? Not really. I've got a strong echo coming in now. I'm not sure why.
Let's just move the other way then. That's fine. Joe, you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Tom. I think I'm fine as well. It's not too bad, I don't think. I'm just checking now to see am I okay. Yeah, I'm okay. Am I in here as well?
I think we're good.
So I am, which is a good thing.
Are we good? We got an echo or not?
Everything okay now? Everything all right there, Tom?
Everything's fine for me. Cat, is everything right for you?
You all right, Cat?
I think so, yeah. It was just suddenly throwing up a strong echo for a very short period of time.
Oh, strange.
Okay. Right, okay. No, everything seems nominal now again. Yep, perfect.
Yeah,
we're back.
We'll carry on. So it's all good. So we've got another question, and then we'll move on to sort of getting to sort of the point of wrapping it up, sort of thing. There's a comment in here from JK Jets saying, "Do you know Captain Richard White?"
I've just had a quick look through my logbook, and I certainly don't have a Richard White in the logbook. The funny thing is, especially with long-haul pilots, we don't meet each other. We fly infrequently, about 4 times a month, so about 40 flights a year. When I say flights, I mean trips. So, from Heathrow to somewhere and back again.
Of course.
About 4 times a month, 40 times a year. And we fly with first officers. By virtue of the fact that captains fly with first officers. So I got to meet a lot of first officers, but not other captains. The only time you ever meet other captains is on the very longest, like down to Buenos Aires, where you end up with 2 full crews, or in the bar. And I may well have met Richard White in the bar, but I don't seem to have flown with him.
Oh, okay. Another comment from him says he moved from the 747 to the A380.
Oh, the A380, wow.
That's beyond the pale. No, I've got some very good friends who moved on to the A380. Most of them have come back since.
It says it all about what it's like to fly in that, I suppose.
Amazing.
But one thing I did want to talk about, sort of as an ending sort of topic, really, as we mentioned sort of at the beginning, lots of us would have seen you on Planespotting Live. Tell us sort of how that sort of came about.
It was just out of the blue. I got I think it was on LinkedIn initially. I got just a message from a production company, and they said they were putting together this Planespotting Live show, and would I like to be the live talking, unscripted aviation expert, effectively. They explained that the presenters were going to be heavily scripted, and that they would hand over to me whenever they saw something explaining. So we were out in the open air at East Midlands Airport in the little museum next to the runway.
Yeah.
And what would happen is Peter Snow or Andy Peters would spot an aeroplane on finals, or the camera up on a platform would spot an aeroplane coming in about 5 miles, and they'd have it on screen, and it would come up on screen, and they'd say, "Cat, tell us what the pilots are doing in there now." And I'd have to try and work out, well, how far away is it? And then I'd see the gear going down, and that would be a clue that they were just passing 7 miles or 6 miles or thereabouts, and I'd basically talk them down to the runway. And I had a little earpiece in. Whenever they needed to go back on script, they'd count me out, and they'd say, "Cat, hand back to Andy in 10, 5, 4, 3," and I'd still be talking, and this would be going in my ear, and I'd be saying, "And back to you, Andy." And it was an interesting experience. It was not my first experience of live TV. I tend to be on local TV down here in South Wales, BBC and ITV. They often call me in to do a live piece on a news bulletin.
Okay.
Sometimes about aviation, sometimes about other things.
Yeah.
They seem to think I'm fairly reliable, that I can talk scripted. But I was the only person on Planespotting Live that had no script. We'd go into the script meeting in the morning, and they'd be changing the odd word here and there. And Andy and Peter would be looking at a teleprompter, and they'd hand over to me, and I'd literally just have to fill in with words I was making up as I went along.
It's almost like put on the spot then, I suppose.
Yeah, I found it really interesting. I enjoyed myself no end on it. It was pleasant to meet the two presenters. Peter Snow is a real gentleman. He's very helpful. We had a really nice sort of waiting room type trailer thing with a makeup and costume at one end, and it was one of these huge Winnebago. So we were all sitting around in there till then we'd come across to a meeting or a complete run through in the afternoon, and then eventually we'd go live. It was just a fascinating experience. I can't wait to be asked to do it again, to be honest.
Was its intention to always be I think it was only 4 episodes, if I'm correct, wasn't it?
Was it? I think it was 3, wasn't it?
3 or 4. It was
yeah,
short-lived anyway. I know that much.
It was always intended to be, just the same as this sort of spring watch type thing. Literally just a quick burst of live programs on successive nights.
Yeah. Do you know if there's any sort of plans for it to come back, or is it just simply like a one-off sort of thing?
Not that they've told me about.
Yeah.
It'd be great fun if it did. How am I saying?
Yeah, I think I watched a couple of episodes of it myself, and I used to love stuff like that myself, and it's great fun to actually watch as well,
Yeah, I just enjoy my aviation. I'm happy to talk about it with anyone, which is what I'm doing here, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's been interesting listening to you all about your career and everything, and being an actual captain of the 747, and of course the Tristar, of course. Like I used to love the Tristar actually myself. And that's a question I did want to actually ask you earlier on. Cap, would you? I didn't want to interrupt because it's absolutely fantastic listening to everything. The flight deck on the Tristar, now, was it very spacious?
It was, yeah. You've got to remember the 747, the flight deck bubble, and it's much
Yeah.
narrower than most people think. So it's very long, and you know, that's it produces a very cramped front end of the flight deck. Whereas on single deck airplanes, the 777 is the same. It's very, very wide. So you can't just move the pilot seats further apart because we've got to be able to reach all the controls from either side. So you can't just shove us out to the windows. So there's always a big gap for our bags and things down the sides. There isn't on a 747. So it's nice and spacious.
Excellent. That's amazing. So it is. Wow.
Well, a question here from Ian Hartley about the Planespotting live program. Was Andy Peters a real av geek, or was he just a presenter?
So, as I said, Andy was heavily scripted.
Yeah.
So there was nothing made up about what. He was saying what was on the screen that he was supposed to say. Whether he's a real av geek, he was hanging on every word. When we were off script and off screen, he wanted to ask me questions about aeroplanes. So yeah, I would say he is a real av, but he's not a particularly knowledgeable one.
Okay, so almost like a beginner.
Yeah.
Okay.
But certainly the interest was genuine. He was genuinely interested in.
Okay. At least that answers that question. So that's fine. Joe, you got any more questions?
I do actually. If first of all, anyway, if any of you wonderful people in the chat want to see Cash back on mine and Tom's wonderful show, please give us a big thumbs up. And Cash, one other question. You were, I remember you saying something about the different variations of the 111 engines compared to the 777's engines. You were saying the different thrust or whatever.
So yeah, the 111 that Dad flew had two Rolls-Royce Spey engines with 11,500 pounds of thrust on each engine. And when I finished on the 777-300, the GE 9115s have 115,000 pounds of thrust on each engine. So that's 10 times as much thrust as the Spey, and effectively 10 times as much thrust in the aeroplane as 11. So it's literally like flying with 10 111s in formation when you kick that thing along the runway. It's a spectacularly good engine.
Wow.
To kind of fathom that whole thing, put it all together, and it's just mad to think about. One engine or the 777 itself is like flying 10 or 11 of one particular plane. It's just frightening to think about.
That's amazing.
It's a lot of power.
Definitely a lot of power.
Wow.
Right. Well,
yeah,
in that case,
definitely.
What we'll do is we'll leave it there. Now, what we normally do for the next sort of 10 minutes or so is sort of give a few shout outs to people.
Yes.
And just give a few shout outs to people that that either wanted to be watching but couldn't, or like the guest can give a few shout outs to people and that. So we'll head into that now. Kat, have you got anybody you want to anyone you want to shout out?
Give a big shout out to.
I mean, I've got to give a shout out to British Airways. 45 years with British Airways, and the support they gave me when I came out, when I transitioned, was breathtakingly good. It wasn't just support that they had to give, the legal requirements. It was obvious that they were supporting me and really proud of me. And that came out with a particular tweet. I was rainbowed by the Independent, and the press officer asked if they could tweet congratulations. I said, yeah, of course you can. So they just tweeted congratulations to one of my captains, Capt Burton, on being rainbow listed. And I responded. So now they've got my Twitter handle at @CaptBurton_UK. I said, thank you very much. And immediately they came back with another tweet. We're all very proud of you, Cap. But they signed the tweet with everybody else's, everybody in the social media office's personal Twitter handles. And I actually was in a training session with Stonewall a couple of years later, and I mentioned that little story, and somebody in the hand up and said, "Cap, that was my tweet." And I was in tears. It was, it was just so obvious that British Airways were genuinely proud of me. I've got to also give a shout out to the people that I work for now, which is Aeros Flight Training, and I'm getting exactly the same off them as I was at British Airways. It's owned by a family, the Duns, and the Duns are absolutely supportive of all the work I do in diversity. I take time off and do diversity work, and they don't think anything of it. They know they're getting value from me as an instructor, and they're perfectly happy to support everything I do, which is, fantastic to know that the people you work for are behind you. So both of those have got to have shout outs. Apart from that, no, just shout out to you two. I mean, thanks for inviting me. And thanks to everybody who came along and listened. I'm really pleased.
Cash,
to have been here.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you, Cash. I tell you, something? It's been an absolute amazing career for you, and I hope you still have much more to go in your career in the distant future, and keep up the good work. You're an absolute lady, so you are, and it's been an absolute honor chatting to you. But our chats won't end there. Like there'll be an odd message sent to check in on you, to see how you're doing okay and everything like that, and I couldn't be in great company with my host Tom Whittle himself, absolute true legend.
Very kind.
Well, as I say, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really appreciate the pair of you. And can we just tell that little tale about how I asked how to pronounce your name, Joe?
Please do this.
Hey. Oh yeah, Cash. Yeah, please do this, because I remember what you said. You said terrible.
So when we all three got together earlier in the week, one of the very first things I said was, "How do I pronounce your name?"
Yeah.
And what came back was, "Well, Ger as in Germany." I said, "Oh, Ger as in Gerbil."
Gerbil.
All of a sudden, guys, you've got Tom and the Gerbil as your two hosts for the next few podcasts.
Oh, gosh! I absolutely love that. So that's absolutely awesome. So it is. Oh, now you have me in the tears laughing here.
Oh dear.
Oh,
it was.
Oh dear.
So funny. Yeah, it was so funny. I just.
Hey, Cat, another one you said as well. What does the gerbil and the Kilkenny cats have in common?
I don't know. I just asked you how you cats.
You know something? I'm still actually trying to work out that one. Do you know that?
Well, you come from Kilkenny, don't you?
I do. I'm originally no, like I'm not an actual true Kilkenny man, believe it or not. I'm actually from a place called, now there's a very, very strange name to my actual hometown. They call it Monavug, but Bagnallstown is kind of a more sentiment name, because there was a special guy many years ago, actually. His name was Lord Bagnall, so Bagnallstown was kind of named after him. many years ago. Even, like I know I was born in 1972, May the 4th, 1972, and you'll probably get a reminder about my birthday coming up on the 4th of May as well, Cash. So you'll probably be sending me a birthday wish on the 4th of May.
Oh, you must have heard of the Kilkenny Cats if you're from Kilkenny, sure.
Yeah, the Kilkenny Cats I know are they're known as a hurling team. Like we have this thing where you play hurling with a wooden stick, as they call it.
Well, I don't know. It's the Kilkenny Cats originally were a pair of cats that fought so fiercely that only the tails were.
Oh my god! Oh, I love it! I thought what a great ending to this show. It's absolutely epic.
Certainly is.
So yeah, I mean, how a gerbil survives with the Kilkenny Cats are beyond.
Well, I tell you, I've survived pretty well so far. So I guess I'm pretty lucky because sometimes, although if I had imagine having 150 cats or coming up and chasing you. Well, I don't know where you'd recover, but anyway, I'll figure that one out. I'd say.
Anyway, I reckon we've just about done that.
Oh yeah, I think so. But that's good, Cash. Well done. Oh, that's made a great end of the show. Now I suppose I better do a couple of shout outs before we do officially end. Well, I know, Tom, I've met a few. I met back up with a few good old friends of mine there the last couple of days, and I better give them a shout out. I want to give them give my friend's mother a shout out first. I want to give a shout out to Sharon Follen. And I want to give a shout out to Davy Follen, and I also want to give a shout out to Rebecca Follen and Mark Collins and baby Luke as well, who I've spent a couple of days with the last couple of days before this show. So and I'll definitely give them a shout out, and everybody that follows me on Facebook, yourself including Cash, a big shout out to you, even though you're on the show with us. But it's always nice to give the guest a good big shout out, and everybody give Cash a big massive thumbs up. And a big shout out to Megan Ann Reid's family also as well, please, as well to everybody. So, wonderful. As I say, what a great show, Cash, and big well done to you, and Tom, of course, a big shout out as well.
Thank you. So, I'll give some shout outs as well. Why not? I'll give a shout out to yourself, Cat, for allowing us the opportunity to talk to you and for listening to your stories and stuff. I'm sure everyone's been very enlightened and getting an idea for what it's like to have a career as a pilot. So a big thank you to you for coming on the show tonight.
An absolute pleasure.
Another shout out for me goes as I always do. Frontline workers around not just the UK but around the world who are continually doing everything that they can during the difficult times that we're going through. So a massive shout out to you guys. And I think fittingly, as you've done it, a big shout out to British Airways for the big amount of respect they gave you.
Yeah, totally agree, Tom. And a fantastic airline as well. Like, as I said to yourself and Kat there, during the group chat, I flew British Airways a couple of times, an absolutely amazing airline. The next time I plan on flying to UK to Heathrow, that's who I'll be flying with again as British Airways. I'll always stick to the one airline that I've trusted from day one, and that's the way it's going to be. And of course, I know when I'm coming to visit you, I'm sure, Tom, to Newquay, I'm going to have to fly an Aer Lingus turboprop aircraft.
I believe so. Excuse me. Yeah, I believe so. But yeah,
Yes.
we'll leave it there. So again, massive thank you to you, Cat, for coming on and giving us your stories.
Like I said, it's been absolutely my pleasure, and I'd be more than happy to come back another time and carry on.
We'd be absolutely delighted to.
Oh, we'd be delighted to have you back. Be an absolute pleasure.
Oh my god. Hang on. There we go. Yeah, so I lost my train of thought then. Yeah, no, we'd be delighted to have you back on again. And of course we'll stay in touch as well and yeah, get you on at some point.
Yeah, definitely be staying in touch.
Now, as we're wrapping up the show, we'll give you a big reveal as to who we've got on next week.
Yes.
So next week's episode will be on slightly earlier. We'll be on at 5 p.m. UK time, of course, because we are taking a little trip across the pond to Chicago.
Yes.
Oh, am I getting a boom from you, Joe?
No, I have headphones still in, Tom.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, so we're taking a trip across the pond to Chicago, virtually, of course, as we talk to a chap who on YouTube has 75,000 subscribers. He's very, very well known for his aviation videos across Facebook and Twitter as well. Anybody that follows him and anyone that's subscribed to him knows how good his content is. So next week we are speaking to Jay's O'Hare Aviation.
Yes, exactly.
And that's going to be a fantastic show for sure. So next week, 5 p.m. UK time. We are slightly early next week, so make sure that you join us for that, of course. And we will go from there. If anybody has any suggestions, of course, as to who they want to see on the podcast, of course, drop them in the comments and let us know. And we'll do our very best to see what we can come up with. But that's the end of episode 3, everybody. And
what a fantastic show!
It's been really, really cool. Like I said, it's been very very educational and very, very just educational, I think, is the best way of putting it. So we'll leave it there. So Kat, do you want to say goodbye to everyone?
Yeah, thanks very much for tuning in, everyone. There's only 12 of you there left now, I think, but it's been a long show, much longer than we were expecting, like an hour and 50 minutes. So well done for all of you who stayed the course, and I look forward to seeing you all again sometime in the future.
Fantastic. Joe, do you want to say goodbye to everyone?
Yeah, to everyone in the chat there, thanks for joining in, and look after yourselves, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you all on the next show, which will be episode 4, as I say. And Cash, again, thank you so very much for a very educational run down good old memory lane. And as I always like to make a good ending to it. Long live the Queen of the Skies. Long may she keep stretching her wings for another few years and keep gracing us for another bit anyway, until whenever that time does come, that will be the end of the beautiful Queen, but not while we're here anyway. Long may she keep going.
Very wise words.
As I say.
So yeah, from everybody here, it's a good night, and look after yourselves, continue to stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Bye
Bye everyone, take care.
Bye.
Now.